of the building, the outer wall of the building, which has been deliberately removed, and here is the side edging of the floor tiling. It's really gone to town in producing a very ornate, very fine-looking floor surface. It's quite a refined floor surface in what has been simply an industrial building. Next, please. Now it leads to the base of a flight of steps leading up to the highest point of the engine bed. Because with the tree out of the way, you can see all this, so it had to go. Next, please. And again, you can see that we have, it's not particularly an engine bed, it's part of a bearing for supporting the other side of the machinery that's been in this large pit. And here, the wall has been removed that went all the way around that part of the building. Next. Now we started to show attention, give attention to the pit that was between these two quite large engine beds, these quite large brick foundations, and between them was the outline, a very broken outline of an inner wall, a dividing wall. As we started to uncover this, we started to uncover this hefty wooden timber, 14 inches square, something in the order of about 14 feet long, some massive timber, as it once had been. And it had also been built underneath this stone pillar, so it had been quite structural and quite massive, but was well past its best. Next, please. So, let's have a recap. Let's think about what we've got. We know that in 1866 there was an engine on this structure, and it was fed with steam from 3 egg-ended boilers, which of course are separate open-air boilers, and all right in the 1850s, but distinctly heavy on coal, and therefore rather uneconomic by the 1860s. So I assume, my theory is, that this area of the site is the original part that accommodated the steam engine, the 2 steam cylinders of that original steam engine. Then G.B. Forster, who was the mineral agent for the mining engineer for the landowner, the Earl of Zetland, he recommended that the mining company get rid of these 3 boilers and the steam engine and replace it with a completely new and more economic structure, engine and boiler, a combined thing, in other words, a glorified traction engine. And that, I think, is when this extension at the far end has been added to it. So certainly by 1874, the 3 egg-ended boilers had gone, and there was a completely new machine was sitting on this engine bed. Next, please. Now, it also exposed this semicircular cutout, an obvious place for where it's been done deliberately for some form of large wheel. And you can see that the centre dividing wall is much more exposed. We're starting to see the finished shape of the whole place. Next, please. I only included that one for Eric sitting there thinking, what am I doing here? Next, please. There's a bit more of this hefty timber that would expose at the far end. It was gradually decaying day by day, but it did represent what had also been here across from this position right the way across. So it was one massive timber, there'd actually been 2 others at least, spanning across this central pit. Next, please. We started recovering more artefacts. Most of it was the sort of stuff you would expect. Fire bars, miscellaneous bits of metal, and so forth. That we eventually got down to the foundation level, and we were able to find out the full extent of the depth and the design of the place. Next, please. A variety of some of the artefacts. This, I think, is a spike for use in splicing wire ropes together. This is a wick, perhaps for a lamp, but I think more likely perhaps for a wick for a lubricator. Next one. Plenty of glass tubes. These are probably from water levels on a boiler. And this brass structure here is part of a tap that so that you can turn the taps and check the water level in the boiler. It's essentially in any boiler to be able to keep an eye on the water level. And certainly these look like those sort of thin glasses. And that certainly is a valve from the tap from one of these. A lubricator. Quite a few pieces of clear pipe. Next. So we got to the point where this semicircular thing, well defined, we have this whacking great pit, hefty timber across this point. There's been a huge timber across here, and another one at the far end there. And we have this great engine bed. So obviously, what we want to know is what sat upon it. What did it look like? Next picture, please. And that's what it would appear to have looked like. You're looking at three drawings from the North of England Institute of Mining Engineers in 1866. And this was an engine driving an endless rope on the wheel here, driving some pumps underground. And this will fit, more or less, a few variations, but it will just about fit on that engine bed we've been looking at. Here's the firebox, there's the boiler, there's the chimney. So you've got a base plate supporting the chimney, and on the tagged on the side you've got this whacking great wheel. Now imagine this wheel being at the end of a winding drum, and there's the cylinders on the top of the boiler with the drive to the winding drum. That basically is what we're looking at the site of. And this is the design of the thing. It's somewhat different, but it was generally the design of the thing that would be there in 1874 onwards. This end is the firebox end. This is where you'd have the fire inside there. Next. Now, I did mention that there was a rectangular pit full of sand, quite a small sort of pit. So I dug it out. It didn't take very long. And a very nicely well-made pit with some nice rounded bricks in the bottom. Very well made, very good pit, if you like that sort of thing. Next. So now we're looking down the length of this pit. There's the pit, cleaned out to its full depth. So what you have is basically the firebox sitting on here, the boiler heading in that direction, and the chimney stack and its smoke box supported on that bit right in the distance there. There's the full length of the thing, 1874 onwards. And here at one side is this curve point. You've had the engine on the top of the boiler driving the spur wheel, driving the two drums in those two pits. It all makes sense. The pit, well, one of the problems with having operating a steam boiler is that you get a build-up in the boiler of sludge and rust and muck. And every now and again, every few days perhaps, you have to blow down the boiler. And the blowdown consists of opening a large valve at the bottom of the boiler, so the pressure of the steam pushes the hot water through this opening low down in the boiler. If you did it the other way around, you'd end up with the steam coming out at a huge rate, and it might get an explosion. By blowing it down, you're blowing the water through this lower pipe. It draws all the sludge and muck out of the bottom of the boiler, and if you have a pit like this, it deposits all that sludge into this pit. So what the pit is a blowdown pit. So you would do this, and of course you would have a long rod to do it, you'd stand well back, it would emit a terrific amount of noise and huge clouds of steam, and then when you close it again, you'd have this full of gunge and sludge, so you could dig it out. And there it is. And if you're occasionally down at Gromont on an evening and seeing one of the engines being sorted out at the end of the day, you find it do exactly the same thing, the blow-down boiler, with a terrific amount of noise and so forth. So it all makes sense. Next, please. Now, the plan here is an OS map of 1894, and here's our area of interest. This is the east end of the Upleatham Mines workings. This is Quarry Lane up from Mask, heading towards Upleatham. Here's the railway line coming past the ventilating fan, going around towards the drift. Now, we've been looking at the hauling engine house, which is on that site. 1894, we're less than 20 years after the new steam engine was installed and it's been removed. This would appear to be a new hauling engine house, 1894, on a completely new alignment. Now, it also suggests a reason for robbing the site of all the brickwork, to simply remove the whole thing lock, stock and barrel across to here and only left the foundations. And so the brickwork's probably been reused in building this new engine house. The question is, why shift it from there when it's doing quite a decent job, hauling out of this drift? Why move it from there to there? 1894. Next, please. There's the reason. That's approximately the site of the excavation, the engine house, on there. Here's 1915. We're still drawing air out of the mine, the ventilating fan is still there. The drift is perhaps being used as a travelling road for guys to walk underground. But by 1914, the mine was in contraction. And we're trying to eke out a few more years by working on the exposed seam at the far east end by quarrying it. And also because by this date, the first war was in progress, there was an increased demand for ironstone. They were attempting to work not just the main seam, but also the pecten seam, which was below it. So there's a reason for the quarry. It's not the main seam which is being worked in the ground. It's would appear to be a quarry in the pecten seam. And it's that quarry that has caused the subsidence in the building. That's why you have a big cavity underneath part of the structure. It's why a massive engine bed has collapsed, because they've been working the ironstone in a quarry absolutely right up against the engine house, which of course was just a derelict foundation by this date. And if it had carried on, then we could easily have worked through that way, but didn't. Next, please. One of the relics we found was this rather nice nut. I think I've actually got it with me. You can see it for yourself. It struck me as being interesting that the nut is about 3 inches across flats. It's a big nut. It's solid. And yet some poor blighter has had to take a chisel, cold chisel, and a very large hammer to it, and then split it to try and get it off. So he's actually chewed his way through there. That's a demonstration in those days. Those were the days of real men. Next, please. There's the brass handle from the top of the gauge glass on the boiler. The glass itself would fit under that end. Now, because we are very friendly with a gentleman who is a steam engine fitter, he reckons it's been the top clack of a left-handed gauge glass. Right. Well, it makes sense because the handle is on the left-hand side, and when you have two of these gauge glasses side by side, you obviously have the handle on the outside. So he reckons it's been a left-hand glass, and it's been the top one. So, it's cleaned up rather well. Next. Johnson's patent lubricator. I thought it cleaned up quite so well, but next. Of course, you've got to find the odd clay pipe. Very handy thing. Next. Right, we're down to foundation level. We can't go any deeper. We have the taller of the two bases, and as you can see, there's some backing grade recesses formed into it, and there's also these things. Well, these are quite simply access points to holding down bolts. There's a bolt up through that one, and there's a bolt that goes up through that one. It goes right the way to the very top, where it's actually been burnt off. The tops of both of them, they would have gone up further. But again, it's all balanced. You've got two going up there, you've got these two at set intervals. Obviously, the drum has been inside there. There's actually grease still running on the wall from it. But these have been deliberately removed for reuse. You can see they've been chopped away the corner of that one to get this timber out. And that, when this has been done, the timbers were far too valuable to leave, so they were recovered for reuse. Next. And just to show that there were 3 of these timbers in a row, 14 inches square, and these are the remains of the other one, which is slowly decaying. Now then, these are holding down bolts. Let's have a look at the bottom one of these. Next, please. No, next one. We haven't got there yet. It shows the state of things with the dig 95% complete. Okay, let's try the next one, please. There it is. This is the bottom sort of cotter, the one that's holding down bolts. And you can see it's in the process of being removed, and then somebody lost interest. There's the cutout. That should be through there, of course. Well, this is the very bottom of the hole, and of course the top of the bolt would have a nut on it that you could tighten down onto to hold the machinery in place. Next, please. Yes, we don't know either. But the fact that it's got marks here, it suggests that it's some sort of paint material that you could be using for a gland in a joint or something, and you could cut it to whatever size you wanted. But that was found, and I'm not quite sure what it was, or the material seemed to be a sort of a softish sort of material, perhaps a patent rubber or something.
How big was that, please?
About 1 foot in diameter. Next, please. So we can pile a drawing of it. I've got a copy of the drawings here, so you have a close look at them. But it's a plan showing the cobbled area, where obviously the guys had his pile of coal outside, and bring the coal in, shovel it into the boiler. There's the boiler working here. The drums in that area, and one assumes that the driver would wander about over here. The drawing showed the driving controls for the steam cylinders being on top of the boiler. So one assumes that, because the guy would be walking in and out here firing the boiler, the driver was perhaps doing a separate job over here. And these are the steps up to a higher level where the guy could go and lubricate the bearing of that side of the drum. So the bearing would sit over there and would require lubrication. Next, please.